Good morning. Welcome to Morning Moments. I'm so glad that you took the time to be with us this morning. Today I have a award-winning film participant, and the film was about him, and author, a brother in the Lord that has a wonderful story, and I'd like to have him share some of that with you today. Todd O.C. Shoemaker, and he'll tell you what the OC stands for. I've asked him, and he'll tell you about that. Todd, welcome to Morning Moments.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me, what do you do and why do you do it?
Well, that's a loaded question because I have a lot of titles. Foremost, I'm a follower of Christ. I'm a husband to a wonderful lady, Laura. We've been married for 22 years, and for almost 18 of those 22 years, I basically lived in a hospital or a doctor's office or a treatment center. I won't go into detail, but I dealt with cancer, Parkinson's, myasthenia gravis, and a host of other diseases that just really wrecked my body for almost 18 years. I averaged 150 to 250 days a year in the hospital. And, but during that time, I guess one of the titles that you would say is I became a missionary in the hospital. I was in there so much, I said, God, if I'm going to be here so much, I need a purpose, because I had been part of juvenile justice, working in that field for almost 30 years. I was a marathon runner, and in one day, all that was taken away when the doctor said that I wouldn't live another 24 hours, and I definitely wouldn't be running again. And so during that time, especially from 2009 until 2019, when I received a beautiful healing from Jesus, I had the opportunity to share the gospel with over 1,000 people in the hospitals, treatment centers, doctor's appointments. And basically how it worked was, when I was told I had 24 hours to live in 2009, everybody always says, oh, what did you pray? Because you're still here. What was the magic prayer? And I said, there wasn't anything magical that happened. I said, all that God did was tell me, never look sick and never act sick, and I'll get you through this. And when I would walk into the hospital or walk into a treatment center, the doctors and nurses would go, well, are you visiting somebody? And I'd be like, no, I'm the patient. And they're like, well, but you don't look sick. You don't act sick. And I would just be able to share the gospel. And so I never had to bring up, hey, can I share the gospel with you? It just went from that question. And so, yeah, we saw God move in some powerful ways during that time.
Yeah. And, sometimes people ask why. And I've talked to a lot of folks that said they struggled with the whys. Yeah. And, but I had somebody say, they stopped asking why and they started asking God, what's next? Mm-hmm. And that's when things change for them.
Right. Yeah. And during that, during those years, I became an abolitionist, helping fight human trafficking around the world, and doing a lot of social media and investigations, and teaching classes on this subject. And God God allowed my wife and I in 2018. We wrote a book that came out in 2019 called The Blessed Overcomer. And really, that was just our story of how we had survived those years. But at that point, I weighed 112 pounds. I couldn't speak. I hadn't eaten solid foods in 3.5 years. I lived off of a feeding tube. And at that point, I did look sick. And it's funny, when we started working on the documentary, I never looked at myself in the mirror. Like, I would shave in the dark. I never wanted to see what people were telling me they were seeing. I wanted to see the guy who was still the runner, who was still fit and living life. And I never, so when we started work on this documentary, I had to collect photos and stuff like that and go through stuff. And I couldn't believe that was me because I had never looked at pictures of me when I was sick.
What the enemy intended for evil, God
Yeah.
turns for good, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah, and we, on November 3rd of 2019, with 2 weeks left to live, I went to a prayer and healing service with Dr. Chauncey Crandall, who's a cardiologist and an evangelist, and he happens to be one of my doctors and one of my friends. And I really didn't want to go. I was just like, I'm tired. Like I was at that point, my wife and I were both at peace with me going home to be with the Lord. But I had a friend named Laura who was in the hospital dying of cancer. And I said, I'm going to this event just to pray for my friend Laura that she would receive a miracle. And that night, I received a miracle. I got my voice back that night after several people had prayed over me. I got my voice back. I ate my first bite of solid food in 3.5 years. A month later, I was out running again. I've since run some half marathons and some 10Ks, in the last few years. So it's interesting too, because every year for 10 years, 10.5 years that I physically couldn't run, every year God would say, go buy a new pair of running shoes, be ready, be ready. And people thought I was crazy, spending money on running shoes that I was never going to use. But, I'm back at it. And so I just wanted to make a quick little YouTube video of, hey, this is my story. Pray it encourages somebody. And some other folks who are in the movie business said, no, this needs to be like a full-length movie or documentary. So November of last year, our documentary, Dead Man Running, the Todd Shoemaker story, came out, and you can see it free on YouTube. I never wanted anybody to have to pay for it, because all I did was show up. I showed up to a tent meeting. So I just have never felt like I should capitalize financially on that. So it's, you go to our website, it's free to watch, and we're hearing amazing stories. People are coming to Jesus watching it. People are being healed watching it. So we're just excited to see what God's doing with it.
It's just great. It's amazing. There's really something to be said. And sometimes people go, well, they're always looking for formulas. Well, what did you say? What did you do? But it doesn't hurt to serve others. And
No.
when I hear so many times, when I prayed for others, or when I focused on others rather
Right.
than me, that's when
Yeah.
God touched me. And it's just amazing when I hear that.
Yeah.
I've heard that so many times.
And what's amazing about that is my friend Laura, ended up passing away in 2020. And she put up a great battle, but God called her home, and but you ask that question, it's kind of like, well, why did I get the healing?
Yeah.
And I went and prayed for her, and here was a young 40s mom of a 6-year-old, her and her husband were doing life, so, but God said, those questions, aren't for you to know.
Yeah.
I gave you what I gave you. And, but through that, because the night after I got my healing, her husband called and said, hey, Todd, Laura's not doing well. Can you round up some folks and come pray outside the hospital? And I got about 9 people that night, and we just prayed and prayed. And Laura's 3 prayer requests. I mean, obviously she wanted healing, but she wanted to go home for Thanksgiving and be with her family. She wanted to be home for Christmas, and she wanted to be home for her son's 7th birthday in January. And God allowed her all those things. And he took her home in March. But what came out of that was now I pray outside of hospitals all throughout Palm Beach County, Florida, where I live. And, we're seeing miracles happening just left and right, just praying outside hospitals. Not, people think, oh, you have to go inside and you have to lay hands on somebody, or you have to be there. We're seeing people walking out of the hospital after visiting somebody that has some kind of health issue, and we're seeing them healed, or we're seeing them come to Jesus because they're looking for hope.
Yeah.
And there's a group of folks there going, hey, we'll pray for you. And they're just so overwhelmed that somebody would take the time to pray for them, that they go, this is what I've been looking for. So, we're seeing some great things happen there. So through Laura's death became her legacy of these prayer meetings happening, and they're happening in all across the country now. Savannah, Kansas City, out in LA. I mean, there's just, people are just getting behind this and just going and praying outside of a hospital, and all of us can do that.
Sometimes people are looking for that burning bush experience. There's, Moses had that great burning bush, and Lord, I want that burning bush. Right. I don't see anywhere in the history of the church or the biblical history, where he ever used a burning bush ever again, just that one time.
Right.
And so we get this preconceived ideas how and when and why God's going to move. And God says, God's God, and I realize God's God and I'm not.
Right. Well, it's so funny. It's because about a week and a half or so after my healing, I was up and I was just like, God, you don't have to answer this question. And I don't really need an answer, but if you want to give me an answer, that would be great. I said, you could have healed me anytime in those almost 18 years. I mean, you could have just spoken the word and I would have been healed. I said, I do have to ask, why did it, why 18 years in did you decide to heal me? And he goes, and I didn't hear an audible voice, but I heard him speak to my spirit and say, if I would have healed you that first year, that 5th year, even that 10th year, all your medical team would have taken credit for it. Yeah. But now only I can take credit, and only credit can be given to me for what I did in your life.
Well, this is such a fabulous story, and I wanted people to go to YouTube. Down below, I'm going to go and put the links of the website, and you go to YouTube, and I'll have all that down here for you to watch and look at this fabulous story. You will be blessed. And there are people that need to hear this interview. You need to pass this interview on, but also pass on the website so that you could be blessed by it. And Todd OC Shoemaker, the OC Overcomer Shoemaker.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and that, and it's funny because people always go, oh, would you give yourself that name? And I'm like, no, I said my medical team did, because I just refused to die.
Yeah.
I just, every time they counted me out, God just always helped me get through it. I mean, my wife and I lost count at, I think, 50 or 60 the times in those 17 and a half years that she was told I wouldn't make it through the night.
Yeah. Geez. Yeah. Well, God's got a future, a hope, and a plan for you, and he's got a plan for you listening today.
Yes.
And I wanted you to hear at least a piece of the story, then you can hear it more so in the film that I'm asking you to watch. Thank you, Todd, for sharing your story. And for those who are listening right now, I want you to stop right now and take the time and say, God, I know you've got to continue work for Todd and his family to do. And I want you to pray for Todd and his family, that God would continue to bless him and continue to put him in the right place at the right time. We're here for a purpose. We're here for a time such as this, and pray that God would continue to be with this dead man running, and just to continue to be a blessing to others. Thank you.
Can I say one thing real quick?
Absolutely.
I want to encourage those that are going through a storm, whether it's a health issue or just a life issue, is every day for 17 and a half years, every morning I woke up and I said, okay, Jesus, today is the day that you heal me. Today is the day that I get my miracle. And when that day would end, I'd always go, well, maybe tomorrow, Jesus. But what I encourage people to do is begin to walk in your miracle before it manifests itself.
Good.
Because then you're already walking in that victory, and you're not allowing life in the storms of life to become your identity. Your identity is in Christ, and that's where it needs to stay.
Oh, what a great word. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you for coming on Morning Moments. And we're just expecting great and mighty things from your life and also from this interview. And I just pray that God will continue to bless you.
Thank you so much. God bless.
All right. Thank you. And keep coming back for some more Morning Moments.